Human history begins long before the first written records. Genetic and archaeological evidence reveals that the earliest hominids emerged in Africa millions of years ago, gradually evolving over vast spans of time. Among these hominids, Homo sapiens, our own species, appeared roughly 200,000 to 300,000 years ago. Over tens of thousands of years, small bands of hunter-gatherers migrated across the globe, adapting to diverse environments. These pioneering humans developed rudimentary stone tools, discovered fire for warmth and cooking, and began forming social structures that would serve as the bedrock of future civilizations. By the Paleolithic era, humans were crafting increasingly sophisticated tools and engaging in artistic expression. Cave paintings found in places such as Lascaux in France and Altamira in Spain reveal the early human desire to interpret and communicate their experiences. These depictions of animals, hunting scenes, and hand stencils illustrate humanity's earliest form of recorded storytelling. While survival was challenging, these groups established foundations of cooperation and cultural traditions. Early kinship networks and shared responsibilities for hunting, gathering, and child-rearing forged communal bonds that would prove essential to human resilience. As the last ice age receded, some groups settled in fertile regions, learning how to cultivate plants and domesticate animals, foretelling the agricultural revolution to come. This dawn of humanity set the stage for the creation of more complex societies and the eventual rise of civilizations. The agricultural revolution, the rise of farming societies. Around 10,000 to 12,000 years ago, humans underwent a transformative shift from nomadic foraging to settled farming in what is commonly known as the Neolithic Revolution. In regions such as the Fertile Crescent of the Middle East, parts of the Indus Valley and the Yellow River Valley in China, humans began to cultivate wild grains like wheat and barley, as well as domesticate animals like goats, sheep, and cattle. This transition was revolutionary. Once people learned to control their food supply, populations expanded and permanent settlements formed. Villages emerged along rivers or in fertile plains, where abundant water and nutrient-rich soil supported larger communities. With more reliable food production, people could specialize in tasks other than farming, leading to the emergence of skilled artisans, pottery makers, and eventually trade networks. Farming also brought challenges. Stored food attracted pests and diseases, and settled communities had to contend with property disputes and social hierarchy. Nevertheless, the Neolithic Revolution laid the groundwork for civilization as we know it. Writing systems eventually evolved, from the need to record harvests and transactions, and hierarchical leadership structures arose to manage growing populations. The seeds of human civilization had been planted and would soon bloom into some of the world's first great city-states. Ancient Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization, located between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers in present-day Iraq. Mesopotamia is widely regarded as one of the earliest cradles of civilization. Cities such as Uruk, Ur, and Babylon grew along fertile riverbanks, supported by sophisticated irrigation systems that maximized agricultural output. Over time, these city-states developed distinct cultures, governments, and social hierarchies. Sumerian civilization introduced some of the world's first known writing forms, like cuneiform, which started as simple pictographs but evolved into a complex script used for record-keeping, law codes, and literature. One of the most famous works from this period is the Epic of Gilgamesh, a poetic saga that provides insight into the Sumerian worldview. Following the Sumerians, the Akkadian Empire unified much of Mesopotamia under Sargon of Akkad, creating one of history's earliest empires. Later, the Babylonians rose to prominence, with King Hammurabi establishing a famous law code that sought to provide justice and order. Babylon itself became a cultural and commercial center, exemplified by the legendary Hanging Gardens, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. These early states pioneered advancements in mathematics, astronomy, and law, setting foundations that influenced subsequent civilizations across the globe. Ancient Egypt, the kingdom along the Nile. For over 3 millennia, ancient Egypt thrived along the fertile banks of the Nile River, forming one of history's most enduring civilizations. The Nile's predictable flood cycle provided nutrient-rich silt, enabling bountiful harvests to support a thriving population. Egyptian society was deeply religious, worshipping a pantheon of gods, with Ra, the sun god, and Osiris, the god of the afterlife, playing central roles. The pharaoh, both king and divine representative, stood at the pinnacle of Egyptian society. Monumental architecture such as the pyramids at Giza and the vast temple complexes at Karnak and Luxor were feats of engineering and devotion. These structures required a robust administrative system to mobilize labor, manage grain supplies, and maintain social order. Egyptians excelled in mathematics, medicine, and art, evident in their detailed hieroglyphic carvings and preserved mummies. Pharaohs like Hatshepsut expanded trade routes into Africa and the Levant, boosting Egypt's wealth and influence. Later leaders like Ramses II embarked on military campaigns that shaped borders and left lasting architectural legacies. Though eventually conquered by foreign powers, from the Persians to the Greeks under Alexander the Great, Egypt's distinct culture persisted. Even under Roman rule, the legacy of the pharaohs profoundly influenced neighboring civilizations. Hieroglyphs, monumental tombs, and enduring myths of the afterlife remain iconic hallmarks of ancient Egypt's legacy in world history. The Indus Valley Civilization, urban planning and mystery. Between roughly 3300 and 1300 BCE, a sophisticated civilization flourished along the Indus River in what is now Pakistan and northwest India. Known for its advanced urban planning, the Indus Valley Civilization, also called the Harappan Civilization, featured cities like Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, which boasted grid-patterned streets, multi-story brick houses, and complex drainage systems. Remarkably, this civilization displayed a level of uniformity in city design, weights and measures across distant sites, hinting at a centralized authority or shared cultural norms. One of the civilization's mysteries lies in its still undeciphered script, found on clay seals and pottery fragments. Artifacts such as figurines, beadwork, and elaborate seals suggest a rich cultural and religious life. Unlike other ancient civilizations, the Indus Valley sites reveal limited evidence of monuments or massive palaces, pointing to a potentially more egalitarian societal structure. By around 1900 BCE, the Indus Valley civilization began to decline, possibly due to shifting river patterns, climate changes, or overuse of the land. The enigma of their script and the relative scarcity of decipherable texts mean that much of their social, political, and religious organization remains unknown. Nevertheless, the legacy of advanced city planning and water management greatly influenced subsequent cultures in the Indian subcontinent. Ancient China, dynastic foundations. Far to the east, complex societies emerged along the Yellow, Huanghe, and Yangtze rivers. Early states like the Xia dynasty, possibly semi-legendary, the Shang dynasty, and the Zhou dynasty set the cultural bedrock for what would become a continuous Chinese civilization. The Shang dynasty, c. 1600–1046 BCE, is credited with the earliest confirmed written records in Chinese history inscribed on oracle bones used for divination. Later, the Zhou dynasty introduced the concept of the mandate of heaven, wherein a ruler's legitimacy stemmed from divine approval lost when corruption or misrule prevailed. This principle influenced Chinese governance for centuries, legitimizing dynastic cycles of rise and fall. Chinese society became stratified, with kings, nobles, peasants, artisans, and merchants forming a hierarchical structure. Agriculture thrived, especially rice cultivation in the south, fueling population growth. During the later Zhou period, the Spring and Autumn and Warring States eras saw the rise of influential philosophers like Confucius and Laozi, whose teachings became integral to Chinese cultural values. Iron technology advanced, and states built defensive walls to protect borders, foreshadowing the Great Wall in future dynasties. These foundational ages laid the groundwork for the unification of China under the Qin dynasty, forging an empire that would greatly shape East Asian history. Classical civilizations: Persia, Greece, and Rome. Between roughly 500 BCE and 500 CE, the Persian, Greek, and Roman civilizations dominated large swaths of Eurasia, shaping cultural, political, and philosophical frameworks still influential today. Persian Empire. Under the Achaemenid dynasty, rulers like Cyrus the Great and Darius built a vast empire stretching from the Indus Valley to the Aegean Sea. Noted for efficient governance, the royal road facilitated trade and communication across diverse regions. Zoroastrianism emerged as a major faith, impacting later religious thought. Ancient Greece. Independent city-states such as Athens and Sparta experimented with various forms of governance, from democracy to oligarchy. Philosophers like Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle examined ethics, politics, and the nature of reality. Greek achievements in art, architecture, e.g., the Parthenon, and theatre set standards for Western culture. Roman Republic and Empire. What began as a small city on the Tiber grew into a vast empire encircling the Mediterranean. The Republican era saw the development of systems of checks and balances, while generals like Julius Caesar reshaped politics through conquest. Transitioning into the Roman Empire under Augustus, Rome reached unprecedented territorial extent. Roman law, engineering feats like aqueducts, and massive road networks underpinned a centralized empire. Political turmoil, economic strain, and external pressures eventually led to the empire's western collapse in 476 CE, but the Eastern Roman Byzantine Empire persisted for centuries. These classical civilizations laid core foundations in governance, philosophy, art, and science that would echo throughout the world and across time. The rise of major world religions, faith, philosophy, and society. During the first millennium BCE and well into the Common Era, several major religious and philosophical traditions emerged, transforming how societies understood the divine and organized themselves. Hinduism, evolving from the Vedic traditions in the Indian subcontinent. Hinduism is characterized by a vast pantheon of deities, spiritual texts like the Vedas and Upanishads, and philosophies on dharma, duty, karma, action, and samsara, rebirth. Buddhism, founded by Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, in the 6th century BCE. Buddhism teaches the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path to end suffering through enlightenment. It spread across Asia, adapting to various cultures. Confucianism and Taoism. In China, Confucius emphasized social harmony through ethical conduct and respect for hierarchy, while Laozi's Taoism encouraged living in harmony with the natural way, Tao. These ideas deeply influenced East Asian societies and governance. Judaism, centered on a covenant relationship between the Hebrew people and God, with foundational texts like the Torah. Jewish diasporas played significant roles in cultural and intellectual developments worldwide. Christianity. Emerging in the 1st century CE from Jewish traditions, Christianity spread through the Roman Empire, eventually becoming its official religion under Emperor Constantine. It developed a vast ecclesiastical structure and profoundly influenced Western civilization. Islam, founded in the 7th century CE by the Prophet Muhammad in Arabia, Islam quickly expanded across the Middle East, North Africa, and beyond. It introduced major cultural and scientific contributions during the Golden Age of Islam. These religions and philosophies fundamentally shaped moral codes, legal systems, art, and governance across continents, intersecting with cultures in diverse, lasting ways. The Islamic Golden Age, scholarship and cultural flourishing. From the mid-8th century to the 14th century, the Islamic Golden Age propelled advancements in science, mathematics, medicine, and philosophy. Centered primarily in the Abbasid Caliphate based in Baghdad, scholars translated and preserved texts from ancient Greece, Persia, and India, blending them with innovative research. A house of wisdom. became a renowned center for scholarly pursuits, hosting luminaries like Al-Khwarizmi, whose works on algebra revolutionized mathematics, and Ibn Sina, Avicenna, whose medical encyclopedia influenced European medicine for centuries. This era also saw the flourishing of art, architecture, and literature. Arabic calligraphy, geometric patterns, and lush mosaics adorned mosques and public buildings across the empire. Philosophers such as Al-Farabi and Ibn Rushd Averroes engaged deeply with Aristotelian thought, shaping intellectual discourse in both the Islamic world and medieval Europe. Economically, trade routes across the Islamic world connected Asia, Africa, and Europe, facilitating the exchange of goods, ideas, and technology. Prosperous cities like Cordoba in Al-Andalus, Islamic Spain, and Damascus in the Levant were vibrant hubs of culture. This period of intellectual curiosity and cosmopolitan commerce was instrumental in setting the stage for the European Renaissance, showcasing how knowledge transcends cultural and geographical boundaries. The medieval world, feudalism, knights and castles in Europe. Following the collapse of the Western Roman Empire, Europe transitioned into the Middle Ages, 5th to 15th century. A patchwork of kingdoms, principalities and fiefdoms emerged, united by Christianity, yet fragmented politically. The feudal system dominated, with land divided among lords who pledged loyalty to kings in exchange for military service and protection. Knights, bound by chivalric codes, protected their lord's domain and exemplified martial valor. Daily life revolved around manors, self-sustaining estates with peasants and serfs working the land. The Catholic Church held immense power, influencing not only spiritual matters, but also politics and culture. Monasteries served as centers of learning, preserving manuscripts and housing scholars. Yet Europe also faced external pressures: Viking raids in the north, Muslim expansions in the Iberian Peninsula, and Magyar incursions in the east. Over time, these threats spurred the development of stronger central governments. Grand Gothic cathedrals began to rise by the High Middle Ages, reflecting both religious devotion and architectural ingenuity. Universities were established in cities like Paris and Bologna, fostering scholastic debate and the gradual rediscovery of ancient texts through interactions with the Islamic world and Byzantine Empire. By the late Middle Ages, trade networks expanded and cities grew, laying groundwork for the transition into the Renaissance. African kingdoms and empires, trade and culture. Throughout history, Africa has been home to diverse societies and powerful empires. In West Africa, kingdoms like Ghana, Mali, and Songhai flourished along trade routes that traversed the Sahara, exchanging gold and salt for goods from North Africa and the Middle East. The Empire of Mali, under Mansa Musa in the 14th century, became synonymous with immense wealth. His legendary pilgrimage to Mecca showcased the empire's riches to the wider Islamic world. East Africa hosted city-states like Kilwa, Mombasa, and Sofala, which thrived on Indian Ocean trade, connecting Africa to Arabia, Persia, India, and even China. Inland, the Kingdom of Great Zimbabwe, 11th to 15th century, constructed imposing stone structures that still captivate archaeologists. In the Horn of Africa, Aksum, in present-day Ethiopia and Eritrea, rose as an influential trading power, adopting Christianity early and issuing its own coinage. These African kingdoms developed rich cultural traditions, including advanced metallurgy, intricate oral literature, and vibrant artistic expression. Griots, oral historians, preserved genealogies and historical events through storytelling and music. This tapestry of trade, religion, and culture shaped a dynamic and interconnected continent, laying foundations for Africa's enduring legacy in global history. The Mongol Empire, the rise of the Steppe conquerors. In the early 13th century, Genghis Khan united the Mongol tribes of the Central Asian steppe, launching a series of conquests that forged the largest contiguous land empire in history. Mongol armies, famed for their superior horsemanship, archery skills, and disciplined tactics, swiftly conquered vast territories across Asia, the Middle East, and parts of Eastern Europe. Under Genghis Khan and his successors, the Pax Mongolica facilitated trade and cultural exchange along the revitalized Silk Road, connecting China, the Islamic world, and Europe. Despite their fearsome reputation, the Mongols often adopted and supported local administrative practices, employing skilled individuals from conquered regions. Kublai Khan, Genghis's grandson, established the Yuan dynasty in China, blending Mongol and Chinese traditions. The Mongol Empire's vast reach stimulated cross-continental contact, accelerating the exchange of goods, technologies, and ideas. Innovations in paper currency, gunpowder, and maritime navigation spread widely during this period. However, internal divisions, the sheer size of the realm, and resistance in subjugated territories eventually led to the empire's fragmentation into smaller khanates. Still, the Mongols left a profound impact on global history, reshaping political boundaries and fostering unprecedented cultural connectivity.
The Age of Exploration, charting the seas. Beginning in the late 15th century, European powers like Portugal and Spain initiated unprecedented maritime expeditions. Mariners such as Bartolomeo Diaz and Vasco da Gama navigated around Africa to reach India, while Christopher Columbus sailed westward across the Atlantic aiming for Asia, but encountering the Americas instead. These discoveries ignited competitive drives among Europe's maritime nations, including England, France, and the Dutch Republic. The establishment of transoceanic trade routes accelerated global exchanges of goods, people, and ideas. This era, sometimes referred to as the Columbian Exchange, saw crops like maize, potatoes, and tomatoes move from the Americas to Europe, Africa, and Asia, while Old World domesticated animals like horses and cattle were introduced to the New World. However, European expansion also brought profound disruption and tragedy. Indigenous populations in the Americas suffered catastrophic declines due to disease and conquest, and the Atlantic slave trade forcibly transported millions of Africans to the colonies. Still, the Age of Exploration reshaped the global map, fostering the rise of colonial empires and permanently integrating distant continents. Technologies like the magnetic compass, astrolabe, and improved ship design fueled these journeys. The consequences, both constructive and destructive, transformed political power, structures, economies, and cultural identities across the world. The Renaissance and the Reformation, cultural and religious shifts from the 14th to the 17th century, Europe underwent a cultural reawakening known as the Renaissance, centered in Italian city-states like Florence, Venice, and Rome before spreading north. Influenced by revived interests in classical Greek and Roman texts, artists, architects, and scholars championed humanism, emphasizing human potential and achievements. Luminaries such as Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, and Raphael revolutionized art with perspective, anatomical realism, and new techniques in sculpture and painting. In parallel, the Northern Renaissance produced figures like Albrecht Dürer and Erasmus, merging Italian artistic principles with distinct regional styles and scholarly focuses. The invention of the printing press by Johannes Gutenberg around 1440 democratized knowledge, enabling books, including the Bible, to be produced in large numbers, spurring literacy and intellectual exchange. The Protestant Reformation, ignited by Martin Luther's 95 Theses in 1517, challenged the Catholic Church's authority, doctrines, and practices. Other reformers like John Calvin and Huldrych Zwingli further fractured the Church. In response, the Catholic Counter-Reformation sought internal reforms and reinvigorated doctrine, exemplified by the Council of Trent. This religious upheaval reshaped Europe's political alliances, led to waves of warfare and persecution, and significantly influenced modern notions of religious freedom. The Age of Revolutions, from independence to change, the late 18th and early 19th centuries witnessed a wave of political upheavals and transformations. In North America, the American Revolution, 1725 to 1783, saw the 13 colonies break from British rule, establishing the United States. and advancing Enlightenment ideals of liberty, equality, and self-governance. Inspired in part by these events, the French Revolution, 1789-1799, toppled. The monarchy unleashed radical social changes and ultimately paved the way for Napoleon Bonaparte's rise to power. These revolutions spurred similar movements worldwide. In Haiti, enslaved Africans staged a successful rebellion, forming the first independent Black Republic in 1804. Across Latin America, figures like Simón Bolívar and José de San Martín led independence struggles against Spanish colonial rule, resulting in the creation of new republics. The common threads in these revolutions were discontent with autocratic rule, oppressive taxation, and social inequality, fueled by Enlightenment philosophies emphasizing reason, rights, and the social contract. Though the outcomes varied, some leading to stable republics and others to subsequent dictatorships, this age of revolutions reconfigured political maps and ideals. It laid the groundwork for future constitutional governments, civil liberties, and the notion that authority ultimately rests with the people. These upheavals served as a catalyst for the modern concept of nations built on shared identity, governance and law, the Industrial Revolution, mechanization, and urban growth throughout the 18th and 19th centuries. Europe and North America witnessed profound socio-economic transformations known as the Industrial Revolution. Originating in Britain, advances in textile machinery, steam power, and metallurgy reshaped production processes. Inventors like James Watt refined the steam engine, fueling factories, and revolutionizing transportation with the steam locomotive and steamship. The factory system replaced cottage industries, concentrating labor in rapidly expanding urban centers. This shift spurred population growth, but also led to overcrowded housing, pollution, and challenging working conditions for the emerging industrial workforce. Child labor and low wages were common, sparking early labor movements and calls for social reform. Simultaneously, industries such as coal mining, iron smelting, and railroad construction underpinned unprecedented economic expansion.
Over time, the industrial model spread to continental Europe, the United States, and beyond, boosting global trade and igniting powerful economic competition. Political ideologies like liberalism, socialism, and Marxism arose in response to industrial society's inequities, questioning the nature of work, wealth distribution, and state responsibility. The Industrial Revolution permanently altered human lifestyles, setting a precedent for technological progress as a driving force in shaping modern civilization. Colonialism and imperialism. The race for empire. Spurred by industrial might and strategic ambitions, European powers in the 19th and early 20th centuries competed to control vast overseas territories, leading to colonial empires that spanned Africa, Asia, the Middle East, and the Pacific. Nations like Britain, France, Germany, Belgium, and others sought raw materials, new markets, and geopolitical dominance. The Berlin Conference of 1884-1885 infamously partitioned Africa among European nations with minimal regard for existing ethnic or political boundaries. Imperial rule often involved direct administration, missionary activity, and infrastructure projects like railroads, while also imposing political and cultural hierarchies. Indigenous populations faced exploitation, forced labor, and cultural assimilation, giving rise to resistance movements. In India, Britain employed both direct and indirect rule through the East India Company before seizing formal control after the Sepoy Rebellion of 1857. Simultaneously, Japan emerged as a modern imperial power in East Asia, exemplified by victories over China and Russia. The United States exerted its own imperial influence in the Pacific and Latin America, epitomized by the Spanish-American War. This global race for empire redefined international relations, fueled nationalist sentiments, and set the stage for the geopolitical tensions that would ignite the world wars. World War I, the Great War, From 1914 to 1918, World War I consumed much of Europe, drawing in colonies and allies across the globe. Sparked by the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary, deep-rooted rivalries and alliances, the Triple Entente, France, Russia, Britain, versus the Central Powers, Germany, Austria-Hungary, Ottoman Empire, plunged into a devastating conflict.
Characterized by trench warfare, the Western Front became a grisly stalemate, where soldiers faced machine guns, poison gas, and relentless artillery barrages. Millions were killed in battles like Verdun, the Somme, and Passchendaele, reflecting the industrial-scale carnage. On the Eastern Front, Russia struggled with internal discontent, culminating in the Russian Revolution of 1917. The entry of the United States into the war in 1917 tipped the balance, providing fresh troops and resources. The war ended with the armistice on November 11, 1918, followed by the Treaty of Versailles, which placed heavy reparations on Germany and redrew European borders. The collapse of empires, Ottoman to Austro-Hungarian, Russian and German, created new nations, but sowed seeds of future discord. World War I's massive casualties, economic ruin, and disillusionment profoundly reshaped political landscapes and social attitudes, setting the stage for an uneasy interwar period. World War II, global conflict, and aftermath. Barely 2 decades after WWI, renewed tensions erupted into World War II, 1939-1945. Germany, under Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party, sought to overturn the Treaty of Versailles and expand territory, aligning with Fascist Italy and Imperial Japan to form the Axis powers. The Allied powers, initially led by Britain, France, and later joined by the Soviet Union, the United States, and others, fought a total war on multiple fronts. Early German blitzkriegs overran Poland, France, and much of Eastern Europe. In the Pacific, Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor brought the U.S. fully into the war. Critical turning points included the Battle of Stalingrad on the Eastern Front, the D-Day landings in Normandy, and the fierce island-hopping campaign against Japan. Technology escalated warfare, culminating in the Manhattan Project and the dropping of atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, prompting Japan's surrender. This conflict was the deadliest in human history, with an estimated 85 million fatalities. The Holocaust perpetrated by the Nazis resulted in the genocide of 6 million Jews and millions of others. Post-war settlements divided Europe, especially between Western and Soviet spheres of influence, marking the beginning of the Cold War. The United Nations was established to prevent future global conflicts, though the devastation of WW2 cast a long shadow over the latter half of the 20th century.
The Cold War, a bipolar world. Following World War II, the world found itself divided into 2 major blocks, the United States and its Western allies versus the Soviet Union and its satellite states. This era, known as the Cold War, c. 1947-1991, was marked by ideological confrontation, capitalism versus communism, and an escalating arms race, most dangerously exemplified by the development of nuclear weapons on both sides. High-stakes standoffs like the Berlin blockade, the Cuban Missile Crisis, and proxy wars, Korea, Vietnam, Afghanistan, kept the superpowers on constant alert, but stopped short of direct nuclear conflict. Space became another battleground, with the space race propelling achievements such as Sputnik, the first satellite, and the Apollo moon landings. The Iron Curtain split Europe, embodied physically by the Berlin Wall. Winds of change eventually blew through Eastern Europe, spurred by economic stagnation in the Soviet Union and liberalizing reforms under Mikhail Gorbachev, Glasnost, and Perestroika. In 1989, uprisings toppled communist regimes across Eastern Europe, and the Berlin Wall was breached. 2 years later, the Soviet Union dissolved, ending the Cold War. This profound geopolitical shift gave rise to a new era of globalization and redefined alliances worldwide. decolonization, and the post-colonial world. After World War II, growing nationalist movements, external pressure, and shifting global power dynamics led to decolonization across Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. Nations under European rule pushed for self-determination, inspired by principles laid out in the Atlantic Charter and bolstered by superpower rivalry, which occasionally provided financial and military support to independence movements. In India, Mahatma Gandhi's non-violent resistance movement prompted Britain to grant independence in 1947, though it was followed by the tumultuous partition of India and Pakistan. Across Africa, countries such as Ghana, Kenya, Algeria, and many others negotiated or fought for independence. The newly formed nations faced challenges of governance, economic development, and forging national unity from diverse ethnic groups. Some countries remained tethered to former colonial powers through neo-colonial economic dependencies, while others embraced Pan-Africanism or Pan-Arabism to unite broader regions under shared identity.
In Southeast Asia, nations like Vietnam, Indonesia, and Malaysia emerged from colonial or wartime occupations, each following distinct paths. The Middle East, post-Ottoman dissolution, saw newly created states grappling with drawn colonial borders. Decolonization dramatically altered the political landscape, but conflicts often followed, as states navigated Cold War pressures and internal issues. By the late 20th century, the once dominant European empires had largely dissolved, making way for a more multipolar world with newly independent voices. Towards the modern era, globalization and challenges. As the 20th century gave way to the 21st, the world experienced accelerating globalization, driven by advancements in technology, communication, and transportation. International institutions like the United Nations, World Bank, and International Monetary Fund played roles in guiding economic and political cooperation. The collapse of the Soviet Union unleashed a wave of market-oriented reforms in former communist states, while nations across the globe integrated into a world economy marked by multinational corporations and rapid digital innovation. The information age emerged with the rise of personal computers, the internet, and mobile technology, bridging cultural and geographical divides like never before. Yet the global community also faced critical challenges: climate change, international terrorism, economic inequality, and pandemics, revealing the vulnerabilities of an interconnected world. New political dynamics arose with the rise of regional powerhouses, e.g., China, India, Brazil, reshaping the global balance once dominated by Western powers. At the dawn of the 21st century, humanity stands at a crossroads. With unprecedented technological capabilities and pressing planetary responsibilities, our modern societies reflect the legacies of past civilizations and historical events, reminding us that history remains a living, unfolding narrative we shape every day. Conclusion and end card: having traversed millennia of human history, from the first steps of Homo sapiens out of Africa to the modern complexities of the 21st century, we see how countless civilizations, revolutions, and innovations have interwoven to form our world. Each era reflects humanity's ingenuity, ambition, and resilience. This collective past offers valuable lessons and serves as a testament to our shared heritage. Thank you for watching. This comprehensive overview only scratches the surface of our global history, providing a foundation for deeper exploration and appreciation of humanity's journey.